Today's video is all about affordable OLED TVs. Yes, under $1,000 for a good one. I'm not even going to talk about Sansui. That's too easy. So hey, thank you for everyone for joining me today. And let's make sure, I know it's last minute, so hopefully as we get this video going, more and more of you will join. If you click like, this will get out to everyone out there. But yes, for sure, T. Beckett OLED finally dipping under $1,000 for a 65-inch. Yes, and more. We're talking good OLED TVs, right? You'll be surprised. And I'm going to list the different models and where you could find them right now. I put some of the links in my description below. So check the links, and of course, these are 2024 models. So they're going to sell out as soon as they're out. They're gone. These, I think, are the clearance prices. But for the first time, we're talking pretty good TVs for $999. And I've seen these TVs. That's the best part. So I could actually talk about how good they are. And we'll use the benchmark drop-dead budget TV as a comparison, the 55-inch Sansui, which I had briefly. And it is the bare minimum SDR TV, but I think it doesn't have what it takes to show HDR. All of these TVs do. And that's where we'll start, is these are affordable, good OLED TVs, not just affordable for the sake of being cheap. So when I say El Cheapo, it's El Cheapo good TVs, my friends. All right. And yes, unfortunately, Mac, LG without DTS. How does that affect you guys? I mean, honestly, it doesn't affect me personally. I don't see how DTS on a TV going to your amazing audio system that can decode DTS. Normally, if you have a source that's DTS, it's not your TV. It's your whatever, Kaleidoscape, Blu-ray player, right, streamer. So when the TV is your source, does DTS decoding at the TV level make a difference? Let me know. Let me know. I know it doesn't matter to me either way, but for some of you it does. Tell me about your use case, why this matters to you. But big hello to everyone out there. Getty G-Man, Jirai D'Souza, Mac, all of that. So we're going to start hitting, hey, Nigel, hello, hello. We're going to start with the least expensive, and that would be the LG B3, still for sale, $999 for the 65-inch at Walmart. I saw the B3 at M-Wave, and I was floored. The B3 at M-Wave was actually more color accurate out of the box than the C4 at M-Wave. And I was there with the LG rep. So we had the B3, the C4, the G4, the A95L, and the Samsung S95D. And when we were watching just regular SDR content, right? We were watching old school Minority Report with Tom Cruise, some of the old TV shows, right? And we kept on staring at the B3. We're like, wait, this B3 looks better than the C4 and the G4 in terms of color accuracy. It's like, wait, the skin tones look like the Sony. Like both Sonys, the Bravia 9 that was there and the A95L, of course, looked good. And the S95D in filmmaker mode now is pretty good. And this B3 rocked all of them. And no, we kept on resetting it to make sure it was out of the box. So no one came in there and calibrated it by accident, because the B3 did come from LG. And our friend George at LG, he's like, yeah, this is amazing. The B3 is so good, because they didn't have the B4 available. And so at that point, Brian and I looked at each other and we're like, look, if your budget can only afford a B3 and your room is not that bright, because this was at M-Wave, and it was dim lighting. It wasn't super bright, but it was dim. And we were very comfortable with B3. Obviously, when it came to HDR, that's when it could not keep up with the big boys, including the C4. But for everything else, I was very impressed by the B3. And it has your bare minimum gaming features. But at $999, 65-inch, we're there. So if you have any questions about the B3, go ahead and ask. But the next one up might excite some of you even more. The Samsung has one also, right here, and it too is S85D, $999 at Samsung. Now, here's the kicker. It can go down to $899 if you have, or if you are an offer member. So Offer members can get this TV for $900, and that means if you're a AAA member, right, the American Automobile Association, or if you are a member of military.edu, first responder, go to Samsung, go to their member offers. If you navigate the top of their menu, you'll see offers. Click on offers. You can qualify to be an offer member, right? Register to Samsung.com, and then boom, you get $8.99. So I'm a AAA member. I checked, $8.99. Now this is the entry level. Now the reason I put $9.99 is everyone else sees $9.99. So yeah, check it out. That's pretty great. Let me see your questions you may have. And if I missed your questions, just keep on asking because I'm going to jump in and I don't want to take too long scrolling up. So let's see what you got here. Jiraiya D'Souza says, cheap OLEDs are too dim right now. We need TCL CSOT to actually bring great OLED performance to the budget OLED market. With RGB inkjet printed OLEDs, we need 2000 nits peak, 300 nits full screen. So Jiraiya, some good points. They are too dim if you're in a bright room and you need SDR sports to be bright. But technically, SDR does not exceed 150 nits. As a matter of fact, it's graded at 100 nits full screen. So if you're watching mostly older TV shows, or actually even new TV shows, right? All TV shows except streaming, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and those guys, even they are not super bright. For sure, I can tell you right now, Netflix, Amazon Prime, they're not peaking at 2000 nits. You'll be lucky if any of their HDR peaks at 1000 nits. Now, these cheaper OLEDs don't even peak that much above 1000 nits, but they give you a satisfying HDR impact in a dark room. In a bright room, you might have to push it a little bit, but you'll be surprised. In regular streaming HDR, the B3 was very similar to the G4. Not because the G4 was any worse for it, but the content wasn't there. And that's what I need to remind people is make sure your content matches your awesome TV, whatever it may be. But to your point about TCL CSOT, so I have TCL CSOT inkjet printed monitors. Well, previously it wasn't CSOT, it was JOLED, Japan OLED, but they acquired them. But same thing, this inkjet printed technology is not cheap. I'll tell you that right now. Both of my monitors are over $2,000 for like a 32-inch and a 27-inch, whatever. They're not cheap. RGB direct view inkjet printed OLED, it may be next gen, it may have high image quality, but two things to keep in mind. Their peak brightness will not exceed 1000 nits. Keep that in mind. Now, their full screen brightness gets brighter than OLED, WOLED, or QD-OLED, but their peak brightness does not get that high. So for me, that's perfect. As a creator, I like maybe the brighter full screen because I'm creating in a bright room. I don't like to turn off my lights. But if you're using this for a TV, know its limitations. So even though TCL CSOT now has access and own this technology, remember that the peak brightness on an inkjet printed OLED right now is not going to match QD-OLED or WOLED. Now, it may in the near future. Their strength is larger window brightnesses. So, definitely horses for courses, right? So just keep that in mind. And I don't think it'll be cheap coming out the door. That's why they're not marketing it yet. They know what we expect from an OLED pricing, and they're not yet price competitive with a WOLED or QD-OLED equivalent. Just an FYI. Is the Sansui OLED TV in the States? Yes, it is. I picked one up at Micro Center, and it was bright enough for SDR. It didn't do HDR, so I returned it. I said to Micro Center, man, this is HDR. I'm sorry, it doesn't do HDR. But you can pick up a Sansui OLED at Micro Center, and they're good for what they are. Unfortunately, with the prices we have here, I think it's a bit too expensive because if you're a Samsung offer member, $8.99, and the Sansui currently is still like $759. I think they sell on Amazon as well. $759, it better be $500, I think. So, and it's 55 inches, right? And hey, thanks for the reminder. Click subscribe and like, folks, if you're enjoying this video. Thank you, Getty. And hey, Matt and Bev, you haven't missed anything other than the $8.99 65-inch S85D that I mentioned. That's available to offermembers.edu, first responder, right? So that's pretty great. We're going to move on to the next TV that I think is pretty great, actually, very great, and that would be the Panasonic. Okay, personally, I think this is the El Cheapo quality OLED to get. 1099 65-inch Z85, and I'll tell you why. It is essentially the brightness of a C4 with the color skin tones of a Bravia 8 for $10.99. So let me repeat that. If you're complaining, oh, the B4 and the Z85, it feels like it doesn't have quite that vibrancy of the C4. It's very subtle, right? Side by side, you'll see it. I really don't think you will, but let's say you want that C4 level. The Z85 hits that, plus it's Sony color processing level. I mean, it's very good for movie aficionados. Now, if you want gaming, I get it. Get the C4. But it games good enough. I mean, for console gamers, it's fine, but it's not C4 level. It doesn't have the 4 HDMI 2.1 full bandwidth ports. But what it does have that none of the other TVs in this list today have are the presets, the picture profiles that gets you the most natural skin tones, whether it's the IMAX or the Dolby Vision or the IQ for the room. This is my favorite movie watching TV on this list. And at $10.99, suddenly I'm like, wait, the Bravia 8 is still $1,300 even on its best day. I think right now it's like $1,400 again. $10.99, $1,100, Z85, Amazon. This is probably, I mean, we're not at $9.99, but it's so good. I think it's worth $100. And it is one of the most accurate TVs you can buy out of the box. So I think that $99, it does something here and it's worth that value. Let me know if you value Sony and you're waiting for the Bravia 8. Well, don't hold your breath. It will never come down to $1,100, but the Z85 on Amazon is. So let me know if you guys are interested in that. Hey Scott, thanks for sharing. I just got the S90D 83-inch and now 65 seems too small. And so this goes to a different conversation, which is as much as image quality may be amazing, let's say on a 55-inch, right? Oh, I can afford a 55-inch flagship OLED. But then you look at a 98-inch mid-tier mini LED, right? So 83-inch, and I have an 83-inch here on our list, the least expensive 83-inch you can get, and we'll get there. Actually, you know what? We can jump there right now. Thanks, Scott, for the segue. Let's just jump straight to that, and I'll keep track of this right here. There you go. At LG, 83-inch, $2,300. Okay, so the S90D at 83-inch is similar, I think, right? It's a little over $2,000. Now, on Black Friday, I know I've seen that 83-inch drop down to $19.99 at Samsung.com. So, but you're gonna have to wait till Black Friday for that. But regardless, 83-inch is a great size, and 65-inch does seem a bit small. And I'd take this over a 55-inch G4, let's say, right? So G4, it's super bright, I know, but at 55 inches, which I think it's not above 2,000, maybe the 65-inch, right? 65-inch is about this price. So the 65-inch G4 versus the 83-inch B4, I'd go with immersion and turn down the lights because I know I'm not going to use all that brightness. And not many of you might realize this, but as you increase the size of your TV, even though it's less bright, the size makes up the difference. Perceptually, it will feel very bright. So as bright as the G4 is in an absolute sense, at 83 inches, trust me, and Scott, let me know if you don't think that 83 inch is bright enough, because the S90D, similar technology as this one, it's a WOLED, similar to the B4. It is bright enough in a normally lit room. And if your room is that bright, you probably have to go with mini LED anyway, or an 83-inch G4, G5, or G5, right? It's even brighter, but how much is that? 5,000? More than 5,000? But I think those of you looking for a value, because we're talking values here, the 83-inch B4, I think, man, $2,300, it really hits the spot. And it's got the gaming chops of an LG. So yes, thanks for that segue, Scott. Let's go back to our program. The most affordable QD-OLED right now. So Samsung offers, right? if you're a member, AAA, first responder, edu, military, certain government personnel, or corporate, if your corporate works with Samsung, you can get the S90D for $12.59. If not, I believe it's like $13.99, which I think it's fair, but I'm not going to call it, oh, it's an amazing value. But if you're an offer member, I had to mention this. At $12.59 for the 65-inch, that is such a good price. Now, I want to bring back up the other Samsung real quick here. So we have these two Samsungs and this bit of news, because I think it's relevant for those of you wondering, if I get a Samsung, what about Dolby Vision? Okay, so if you're curious about either of these Samsung TVs and you're wondering, oh man, that's missing Dolby Vision. And then Netflix announced this week, guess what? We're bringing HDR10 Plus to Netflix. What does that mean? Is it the same as Dolby Vision? So in a sense, it is. Now, part of the detail not many of you may realize, what Netflix is doing is they're taking the Dolby Vision format and converting it to HDR10 Plus. Essentially, HDR10 Plus is not native, right? They don't have a team regrading everything into HDR10 Plus and then putting it out to Samsung. All they've done is take Dolby Vision, the Dolby Vision grade, and convert it to HDR10 Plus. So it's supposed to be a match to Dolby Vision. And now your Samsung, when it has HDR10 Plus on Netflix, essentially is showing what people watching Dolby Vision will see. The question is, well, how close is that? Is it better? Is it worse? So by the end of the year, when more Netflix shows are on HDR10 Plus, I'll try to do a side-by-side to see if it brings, I mean, it's going to be hard. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll try. HDR10 standard versus HDR10 Plus, right? Is there a big difference with this change? Because I've done these before with Dolby Vision versus HDR10 Plus versus HDR10. And the differences are so minor that only side by side can we see the subtle, maybe, shadow differences, maybe in some content, brightness, grading. There may be a bit more specular highlights on the Dolby Vision, but it's less bright. On standard HDR, it's a bit brighter, so you get more of that impact, but you lose a little bit of that gradient. You know, most people will say, I prefer the impact. Most people want the detail, but it's a little bit dimmer. That's to taste. Personally, either one is fine. I don't think it's worth people fretting over. But now you have HDR10 Plus on Netflix. It's going to look more like Dolby Vision. So some of you may go, wait, what happened to that pop when I was watching Witcher? Now it's like a little like SDR, a little flatter, more detail. Hey, you guys asked for it. Now it's there. It's going to look like Dolby Vision. So it's a double-edged sword depending on which side of that coin you're at. Let's see if you have any more questions real quick. Let me pop this back up. All right, let's see here. Oh, good morning, everyone. A little early today, but I figured, you know what? Just jump in and start talking and see what questions you may have, because I think it's important to get these deals out now. These are, again, 2024 models, and the B3 is a 2023 model. And I want to make sure you guys have a chance that if this is your budget and you're looking for a 2025 that's in this budget, honestly, it's not better. The B5 is not much of an improvement over the B4, which wasn't much of an improvement over the B3. Now, at the flagship level, different ballgame, right? All new technologies, all new this, all new that. You're going from MLA to primary RGB tandem OLED. Okay, forget that ballgame. If we're talking mid-tier entry-level OLED, there's not much change. Going from B3, B4 to B5, C3, C4 to C5, panels essentially the same performance. Yes, the software might be a little bit better. We saw that with the C3 to the C4, but ultimately at the entry level, right, one step below the C series, the price, this is it. This is for a TV that's 99.9% of what you're going to get in the successor TV this year. It's not like the B4 is going to get, or the B5 is going to get MLA. It's the same B5, slightly upgraded processor that you may not notice the difference with that processor. So here, my favorite deal is the $1,599 77-inch. For $1,600, the LG B4 is 77-inch at LG, right? So these are all at LG. LG, they will give you either home delivery or you could pick up at a local Best Buy for those of you who want to pick it up yourself. Either way works, but I think that's the best one. At $1,599, you're getting a jump up in size because currently at the 65-inch size, you have the Bravia 8, that's around there, or maybe 1500, C4, 1500, S90D, 1400, if you don't have the offer member deal. And I think for an extra 200, you're going 77-inch, that ends up being more important to me if movie watching and content watching is your thing. If gaming specs are your thing, well, I get it, but that's a whole other discussion. So just some context to keep in mind. Getty, your 100-inch U8K is still rocking. I love that you got in on this so early and you're enjoying a 100-inch TV. And despite all the improvements coming this year to that price point, you're still rocking it. And that's a reminder for all of you that when the 100-inch dropped in price and it became so low that Getty could not resist, for the last year, he's been enjoying a 100-inch TV immersion. And he knows full well what OLED brings to the table. And so Brian and I also recommend that if you're coming from an older LCD TV especially, going to a 100-inch, you're getting better image quality at a bigger size. I get it if you're going from OLED. That you might have to stick with OLED, but even then, that 100 inches versus a 55-inch OLED, two different experiences. One is just pure immersion, and the image quality is definitely good enough to match that immersion. So just something to think about for sure. And Mozart has a good bit of context as well. The B series seems like it's about 2019 level C series and works for a darker room, but keep it dark. And that's something, if it's in the smaller sizes, 65, 55-inch, I think there's a 48-inch as well, absolutely. Now at 83, it's big enough that I think a dimly lit room, right? There's some light, but moderate. I think it's fine. But yeah, if you have light shining on it, you have two problems. The B series does not have good anti-glare, right? You got to save money somewhere. And it doesn't have the brightness to kind of overcome that ambient light. And that applies to the C series as well. I would say if your room is too bright for the B series, it is also too bright for the C series. You have to go to the G series, whether it's the G3, G4, or the G5. Otherwise, or a mini LED, right? Neither the B nor the C, I believe, is bright enough for a bright room, in my opinion. Good reminder. So FOMO, don't forget the difference between the panels when you get to the higher S90W OLED versus QD-OLED. So if you guys are enthusiasts, you'll realize that in the world of, actually let's pull up this so we have some context for y'all. So this TV right here is QD-OLED. Take that out. Right, the S90D. QD-OLED. We love QD-OLED. I love QD-OLED. It's punchy. It's got better color luminance, right? The colors pop a little bit more than an equivalent WOLED. And it only comes in 3 sizes. QD-OLED across the board. It doesn't matter what brand. Sony, Samsung. Anyone else? Sony, Samsung. 55, 65, 77-inch. That's it. QD-OLED is only offered in 3 sizes. If it's anything smaller or larger, it is not QD-OLED, if that is important to you. So the S90D is tricky because it comes in an 83-inch size, and I think it came in a smaller size. Those sizes that are not 55, 65, and 77, not QD-OLED. So if QD-OLED is important to you, keep that in mind with the S90D. Now the S95D only comes in 3 sizes, 55, 65, and 77. They're all QD-OLED, so predictably good to go. The A95L, similarly, there is no mixing and matching there, all QD-OLED. But the S90D, a little tricky, 83-inch is normal WOLED. Essentially, it's like a C4, B4, right? It's just around there. You're getting it for the size and the Tizen and the gaming features that's unique to Samsung. Jizzy Jake, I think I have too much enthusiasm. Why, thank you. We welcome enthusiasm. Here's a good one. Garrett says the Q90D 85-inch for $21.99 is such a good deal. It is a good deal. Now, the question is, It's a good deal if you are looking at gaming at an 85-inch size on a mini LED. I think that 2024, in 2024, the Q90D probably offered the best gaming experience for any mini LED LCD TV, and that includes the Q95D as well, right? Both of those, Q90D, Q95D, any size, you're going to get an amazing gaming experience on an LCD TV. Nothing matches it. So the premium I think you're paying for here is for that gaming feature. Now, if you don't game, then there may be similar TVs at a little bit less, but the 90D is a solid buy. I like Tizen, so I think for me that is a worthwhile price for the gaming features and the overall Tizen UI, which I do like. The Bravia, if you know, give it some context, the Bravia 8 slightly better, but what, $3,700? Is it $1,700 better or $1,500 better? No, of course not. And so that makes the Q90 a very good value if you're looking at the top end, the echelon of LCD TVs. Okay, Raptor buddy, if it's WOLED, why would anyone get a Samsung? They have QC issues. I think I want to put some context. So first of all, I look at the number of people buying TVs on Best Buy and across the various platforms. And when there are QC issues that are pervasive, the rankings are all over the place. And then I read the reviews and you see a certain pattern. Samsung WOLED QC is not any worse than any Samsung, which is to say it's above average. Now, you got people that are very vocal when they have QC issues. The problem is Samsung sells more TVs than any other brand in the world. So statistically, you're going to have more unhappy people. Just even if Samsung has only a 1% problem, and let's say, I'm going to use an example, right? Let's say Sony. Sony. They sell, they're 5.9% of the market. Samsung is like over 30%, 30%. And so when you have that many TVs being sold, even if you have less QC problems than Sony, for the sake of argument, there are as many more of you complaining, and a percentage of total volume is how it works, right? I mean, you make 1,000,000 TVs, and even 0.5% of 1,000,000 is 0.5% too many for those of you who have the QC issues. So I think the QC issues, as far as Samsung is concerned, is a bit overstated because of that statistical anomaly, right? Now, on the other hand, if you buy a Samsung that's under $1,000, your likelihood of QC issues rise significantly. So don't conflate cheap Samsung TVs with more expensive ones for the QC issue, because cheaper TVs, and this is across all brands, Samsung, Sony, LG, under $1,000, they're going to have more QC issues than above 1,000. And at under 1,000, Samsung sells even more TVs than everyone else. Now, what's strange is under 700, TCL has the best QC. So if you're looking at dirt cheap, we're talking the El Cheapo of the El Cheapos, I always recommend TCL. I have seen consistently, whether it's Consumer Reports, my personal experience, the TCLs are just the Honda Civics of cheap TVs. They just work. I mean, they're not great, but they work. Samsung is not so good at that level. So I'll give you that. But I think at the TVs we're recommending here, whether it's WOLED, QD-OLED, or whatever, it's really no worse. I mean, you go to any user forum, you're going to see Sony fans complaining, oh my God, you know, when it's this happens. I mean, Sony had that red brick of death on the A95L where it just died, right? So it really depends on where your buying tier is. So just a little context, but I will tell you that Samsung's customer service could vary. I'll give you that. What price point would the G4 need to hit for you to pull the trigger? I'm thinking I would go for a 77 at 2400. Will it ever be 2400 at a 77? I think it could. I think, I mean, it'll be close. Maybe 26, 25, 26, maybe. it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough to see. The problem is the G4 and the G5 are their flagship products, and those products rarely go below a certain price. Just look at the G3. How low did the 77-inch G3 end up eventually, right? And then give it a 10% discount this year. And I think that's where you're going to be at most 15% less than where the G3 ended with the 77-inch. So it's just something to keep in mind. I think AJ has the best point of all. If you're getting a flagship, regardless of the brand, Samsung, Sony, LG, everyone has had flagship TVs die in them. It doesn't matter what brand it is. At that price point, paying a little extra for a good warranty goes a long way. Now, if you're a Best Buy member like I am, then when you buy a TV, you have automatic 2-year warranty. For whatever reason, they'll replace it, they'll repair it, it's all on them. And if it's 75 inches or above, they'll even come by and pick up the TV. So for me, that's totally worth the annual membership. But regardless, or Costco, that's another one, right? Buy at Costco, you get an amazing warranty with any TV there. Get a TV at the flagship level, you have to have a good warranty because that 1-year manufacturer, I think it's just terrible. First of all, it's only 1 year. Second, you do a lot of the work, right? You call them out, but it's not as concierge as the Best Buy one. And if it's not going to be concierge, the Costco one's the best, right? Because it covers 5 years. So definitely. And with Costco now selling flagship TVs, we're talking high end, it's a no-brainer to wait for it to get to Costco and get the best price there. Yeah. Thank you for the question, FOMO, and I'm waiting for this. FOMO, when will you get the G5 in your studio to review it? It is, I want to guess, in the next 2 weeks. And oh, and we're also accelerating our streaming event at Value Electronics. Speaking of the G5, April 12th is the date. So let me pick this in. Mark your calendars. April 12th, we're going to have a spring kickoff event. So April 12th is our spring TV kickoff where we're going to have the G5 versus S95F. I should get the G5 before this event, but regardless, we're going to have 2 days of just beating up the G5, the S95F, and the G4, going through its various iterations, all lighting conditions, right? Bright room lighting, ambient, dark room lighting, because you'll be there all day. And if you haven't seen these live streams, at Value Electronics, there's a skylight. So in the morning and during the day, the light shines down, bright room on the TV, and the S95F is likely not going to look great. But then as the day starts to get darker and the lights come off, let's say 7 p.m. or so, then the S95F will start to take over. So it'll be day long. So you guys who will experience this with us will enjoy these comparisons because we will go over the settings with you. What does every settings do? What do all the settings, the most accurate mode settings, right? The vivid settings, the sports settings. We'll go through all of that in the different lighting situations. And Brian's going to bring his gaming rig, his PC gaming rig, to see if we can push these TVs to their quoted 165 hertz, right? Because he has a NVIDIA 4090 that we can play with. So we're going to have a lot of fun pushing these TVs in all the various modes, including game mode. 2 days of fun. Any questions you have, we'll answer. And you'll be surprised at how often the G4 will look identical to the G5 and the S95F, because if that's your use case, save some money, get the G4 83-inch. And that's our goal is, when does the G5 and the S95F justify the premium as a new TV? And when can you just pick up the G4 and enjoy saving money on an older TV because your content doesn't demand the best of the best. So April 12th, that's our spring TV kickoff. I'll start posting dates and everything, but that's, what, 2 weeks away? Crazy awesome. Crazy awesome. Christian, thank you, my friend, for the super chat. Will you have the G4 there on April 12th? Yes, I've asked Robert to make sure to keep that G4 on display. I believe we're going to have the G4, what size is this? It might be a 77-inch G4. I have to ask Robert. Whatever G4 he has, we'll put it there. But you guys will see the color and brightness differences for yourself. Well, the color, questionable because cameras being what they are. The brightness and contrast differences in different lighting situation and reflection handling. But for sure, we're going to go over our observations so you have an idea of, and then this is your chance to shout out, hey, this is what I watched. Can you try this? Can you try that? And we'll play with all of that for you guys. A good question, Mozart's Ghost. FOMO, do you remember if this year's 2025 S90F, Samsung's mid-tier QD-OLED, will be matte or glossy? I'm still fuzzy about Samsung, what Samsung is doing with the coating. So here's where I don't know. And this is why I'm saying I don't know. Based on the press release that others have reprinted, they're saying it will not be matte. But then when I was at CES, the S95F table had a very clear little label on the table that said anti-glare coating. That label was on every TV that was there. S95F for the 83-inch S95F, the S90F table, the 8K QN series, the 4K QN series, they all had that little sign. Now, is the S90F going to be as aggressive? That's the question. But having that little anti-reflective label did not give me confidence that it would not be matte. But then when I started reading the articles put out by my peers who were also there, they said Samsung has assured them that it's not anti-glare matte. So I'm left thinking, you know what, maybe the press article is more correct because they would have validated that, whereas the labels, they could have mislabeled it. So we have that. And the S95 or the S90F will be the first TV I get from Samsung because I'm more curious about that because we already know what the S95F is going to be. Anti-glare coating, right? The debate rages on. What am I going to bring to the table, right? I'm just going to pile on. So that's not of interest to anyone. But the S95F is. So I'll get the S95F from Samsung. Maybe, I'm trying to think, April sometime. So in April, we'll compare the S95F to the S95D and see if this anti-glare is indeed what they used last year, because only the S95F will have the latest anti-glare. Everything else, the QN90F, the QN90F, the 900F, the 990F even, they'll be using last year's anti-glare, which you guys hated. And if the S90F is using anti-glare, it would be also last year's, which should be similar to my S95D, which I still have sitting over there. So we'll compare. I'm hoping it's glossy, because if it's glossy, game changer, right? Then the question is, how much better is the 90F than last year's 95D? I'm hoping it's close, if not a match. That's the hope. Like, good question. Dwight, thank you for the super chat. Off topic, but since Samsung isn't putting out high-end mini-LED 4K this year, who do you think will have the best mini-LED this year? Okay, I'm going to take some time because I am so excited about this topic in general. Okay, now Sony hasn't released their lineup yet, so we're going to leave Sony out of the discussion for now. But we do have everyone else's lineup. And when we're talking flagship, so for those of you who are not aware, Samsung has skipped the QN95 series. It's straight into QN90. And Dwight was very careful to say 4K mini LED because Samsung's QN990F is their flagship mini LED, but it's not 4K, it's 8K, and it's outrageously expensive. I don't recommend it at all. Not at that price. Even pixel to pixel performance, it's going to be beaten by a well-made 4K mini LED. And we'll have that discussion separately, but I know if Josh 8K is here, he's going to show up and start yelling at me, but it's just physics, right? I don't think Samsung has been able to overcome the limitations of 8K pixel density. But that's why we're talking 4K flagship. So Samsung's not there. Sony's out of the discussion for now. That leaves us with LG. They're also out of the discussion because LG is not putting out a flagship mini LED. They're putting out a good mini LED. I'd say it's a strong mid-tier designed to take on the Bravia 7, but it's not designed to beat or match the Bravia 9. So as excited as I am about that mid-tier, it just won't have the brightness or specular highlight chops, but we'll see, right? I mean, that's what I've noticed on the specs, but we'll see how close that gets. But let's put LG aside for now, because we know they're no longer in the high-end flagship game. That really leaves last year's Bravia 9, which I still have, and as we saw, it still is very competitive. It's beaten the QM7K, and we're going to get the QM8K at some point. And then there's a QM9K that's coming this year. And if you guys saw, Brian and Caleb were at the Hisense event in New York City like 2 days ago. They introduced the U9Q, U9Q, 65, 75, 85. It is essentially all the processing of their best TV, the UX. And this year there's only one UX. That's the 116-inch RGB mini-LED, right? So they take the best hardware from there, minus the panel, and processing, put it into the U9 series and maxing out 6,500 nits of peak brightness. This beats last year's best mini LED, which was the TCL flagship QM891G, right? That's their 115-inch flagship that destroyed all comers last year. Well, this on spec matches that TV in terms of peak specular highlights, full field. I mean, this U9 is going to be awesome. So I'll be getting that for review. 65-inch size. This, on paper, is supposed to destroy the Bravia 9. There is no question. And it's priced probably the same, if not more than the Bravia 9. So you have that, the U9. Then you have, I can't believe I'm saying this, the value-oriented U8, which is going to be a match for the QM8K, right? These guys are at 5,000 nits or around, but then TCL has the QM9 that only comes, I think, in the larger sizes. It doesn't come in a 65-inch. Correct me if I'm wrong. That leaves the only 65-inch flagship this year that is truly flagship on specs, paper, everything, the U9. That is it. That is your flagship on paper and on pricing. It's not going to be cheap. So you have that. And then we have the QM9K. I think if you're willing to go above 65 inches, and then you have no one else. So if it's both Hisense and TCL defining the flagship this year, what does that tell you? Not only have they caught up, they have surpassed all the big boys in terms of specs, hardware, and pricing for the best mini LED TV. Now, they're not playing in OLED yet, and I say yet. I think we're still a few years away, but to me, I never saw the day where I'm talking flagship 65-inch or 75-inch, Hisense and TCL, and last year's Bravia 9, which is just hanging on, right? It's like Michael Phelps in his last year of the Olympics. Can he hold on to win just one more gold medal because the upstarts are just coming on strong? This is exactly what this is. You got the old veteran hanging on to dear life. It's an exciting year, guys, and exciting because we know that TCL and Hisense don't have the processing in place. It takes a long time. It takes maturity, it takes experience, it takes grading engineers, and it takes a lot of these reviews where they, back to the drawing board, back to the drawing board. Bravia 9 has the software. Can that software, is it enough to keep the hardware brute force of the Chinese companies at bay? And this is so exciting just to talk about. And I know we're talking affordable, good OLED TVs. This is non-affordable, awesome mini LED TVs. So thanks for that change of pace. That's such a good question. I can go on forever about that. All right. Awesome, great questions. So, and if I missed your questions, keep on asking. I'm just jumping back and forth here. All right, KK, how are they putting out? Oh, there's someone at the door. 1 second. Have you guys ever chased away a Jehovah's Witness? They're very resistant people. I'm sorry. What happened? Wait, how did they find the studio? My God. All right. Checking audio. All right, we're back. How are they putting out 5,000 and 10,000 nits when something like a Hisense U7N is only 1,200 nits? How can there be such a difference? Is it in bursts, whatnot? Oh, this is an excellent question. Okay. So first of all, you have to have a more powerful everything. The power unit, the power board, everything has to be reinforced to handle that power. It's not just heat, it's just handling the sheer power, the voltage, the amps, everything, right? So your entire circuit board, the circuits, and the cooling system, it's completely different. Going from 1500, 1200 nits to 5000, 10,000, it's like a race car, right? You're going from a wet sump, dry sump, oil cooling, what kind of cooling are you using, aerodynamics, tires, everything has to change to hit that high performance, right? The grip of the tires, the suspension, same thing here. When you're hitting 5,000, 10,000 nits, the engineering that we don't even think about has to do with thermal efficiency cooling. And that's just for the thermal part. Let's talk about controlling the blooming. At some point, I don't care how many dimming zones you have, you need really good software to manage that brightness, the flashes, bringing it up, bringing it down, and then how much ghosting is there going to be sticking, decay times, right? All that has to be taken into consideration when you're using the technology. So, back to your point, how are they putting out 5,000, 10,000 nits? It's because they've reinforced everything, and doesn't mean they succeed, by the way. It could be white light, as we've seen before with the LG G3 and G4. They get bright, but it's mostly white, sub-pixel doing the work, hitting that MLA layer, getting even brighter, but there's not much color there. So same here, how much of that brightness is there a little bit of color? So, and the difference is that, how can there be such a difference? The amount of cost and expense to maintain, not even maintain, get that flash, it's an energy cost, it's a thermal cost, it's a durability cost, it's an everything cost, right? It's so much easier to hit 1200 nits. Heck, it's easier to hit 3000 nits and maintain some durability. So as far as is it only in bursts or not, it depends on how, well, first of all, realistically, is there any content that demands sustained 5,000 nits? I dare to say no. I don't think Jennifer Gala has that. I mean, she has some content that hits 5,000 for several seconds. Actually, I take it back. She does it on purpose. But real movie content, no. They are not grading to anything close to what these TVs can handle. So the TVs, no, we only need the burst, and we're good, because we know Hollywood's never going to demand more. Now, reviewers, being the people they are, they will put these patterns on and demand that you hold that burst for 5,000 nits. I don't know why, because there's nothing that demands that other than sports. You want to watch sports, 100 full screen at 5,000 nits, okay. But I think 1,000 nits is good for most of you, right? 1,000 nits full screen on an 85-inch screen, that alone is going to heat up your room. I don't think you'll need more than that, but hey, correct me if I'm wrong. You're looking for 5,000 nits full screen? Let me know. I'm sure they could do that and run your power bill dry. But yes, hopefully that answers your question, KK. Scott has a question. Scott in Tampa. If you're in the market for a large TV, like 100-inch range, do you think it's better to spend 2,000 price or 3,000? Okay, so this is a really good question. We're talking about diminishing returns. At what point at the 100-inch range do you hit diminishing returns? Where what you're paying for is like chrome trim, full metal stand, an audio system that you'll never use, right? The features that are picture quality related and the features that less than 1% of the time you'll notice. And so the diminishing returns, I don't think we're there yet. And I'll tell you for many reasons. So first of all, right now, MSRP, I believe 2,600 gets you the QM6K at 98-inch. And when you say 100-inch range, right, we'll include 98-inch as well. So the QM6K currently is like 2,300 or something like that. And you're missing a lot. And I know by Black Friday, it'll be like 1,700. So let's use the QM6K as that baseline benchmark for the bare minimum. There's a lot of work to be done on the QM6K, as you saw at the 65-inch size, right? So whether it's the 65-inch size or the 100-inch size, the QM6K will have the same limitations. Specular highlights will be missing. Brightness, overall brightness will be missing. It will not hit 5,000 nits, right? All of that. So what do you get at 3000 nits? Definitely more dimming zones to give you specular highlights with controlled blooming. So the QM7K essentially is that TV. Going from the QM6K to the QM7K is going from 1800 to 2700. So it's a $1,000 difference. That's a huge difference, which is you're going to get specular highlights, much brighter. You're going to get better, I don't want to say better blooming control, because the blooming could be slightly worse with the introduction of brighter specular highlights, as we saw. There's a trade-off. I think you have to go to from 2000. I wouldn't go to 3. If I want true specular highlights with control, I'd go from 2000, probably 4000, because the QM 8K at 98 inch may make that performance difference worthwhile, because I think that mid-level where it's a little bit brighter, but there's not enough control of the blooming, may be more distracting. You may have to go to the 4000 to get that blooming down properly, and that would be the QM 8K at 98 inch when their prices drop. So it's a moving target. It is definitely a moving target right now. And what is it you value, right? Do you value skin tones and SDR content? If you value all of that, I'd stick with a $2,000 price point, because the HDR is fine. It's nothing to write home about. QM6K, right? Just bare minimum HDR, but its uniformity and black levels are amazing, and it matched the Bravia 9. So for me, if I'm watching mostly TV shows that, like wife and kids, they don't care about HDR. They just want good image quality, natural skin tones. QM6K nails it. I wouldn't go any larger, other than, it feels like the build quality is a little bit weaker, so you'd upgrade for build quality maybe. But image quality alone, I think we are at a very good entry level price point with the QM6K this year. Right now it's just above 2000, but it will be below 2000 by midsummer. This is a great entry point for image quality, in my opinion, especially if, your HDR is great, but you're not like me. Oh, I need that HDR specular highlight, right? Then QM6K is where it's at. So Scott, tell me, what is it you watch, right? Like if you need brighter sports at 98 inches, it's bright enough. If you need brighter than that, okay, that's when you upgrade to the QM7K, brighter full screen. SDR, the QM7K is very similar to QM6K, so it's just brighter SDR and brighter HDR if you need that. So you're paying for brightness essentially. Robert, FOMO can invite them in and tell them, witness this, and show them the awesomeness of the Valerian, and then I'll never get rid of them. Oh, I love it. All right, and I apologize if I missed your questions. I'm just gonna dig through what you got here. Oh, hey, Antique Legend. Thank you for this bit. I'm so busy, I haven't even seen Vincent's latest. I just saw the HD TV test review of the G5, and I'm sad to say it is a downgrade from the G4, still having past issues and removing DTS support yet again. For me, maybe removing the stand is another issue, but you bring up a good point. Now, not having seen it, I do not know what the issues of the G4 is being reintroduced to the G5, or downgrade, so it's worse than G4 in some instances. But let me tell you this, WOLED is a compromise. QD-OLED has its compromises. You just have to live with the compromise. The G4, the G3 has MLA. Fixed a few things, but maybe other things not as good. G5 addressed other things, color saturation, color luminance, overall brightness, expense, should be cheaper to make, but then maybe you're losing something from the last generation. It's never perfect. It has to be perfect for you. And for many people, the G3 or G4, well, I'd say G4, it's a evolution of the G3. So the G4 is definitely better than the G3. And I've been recommending the G4 like crazy because I don't think most of you need the G5. Now, HDR enthusiasts, peak brightness, even brighter sports than ever, I get it. And then gaming with 65 hertz, that's the other big thing. But yeah, Antique Legend, tell me what criticism affects you? Not broadly, oh, it doesn't have DTS, but I never use DTS, right? What about the G5? One thing about the G5, based on Vincent's review, that you're disappointed with, that you think Man, I'm going to get the G4 now. Let us know, because I think that could be relevant to a lot of this. Good point. And Mozart says, have you seen the stand for the 77-inch and 83-inch G5 though? It has a really sharp angled look. I think it's going to look beautiful. $200 though. I have not seen it, but as we said before, Robert Value Electronics will throw it in with a FOMO deal, and that's part of your 10% store credit. Apply it, get the stand, and get an extended warranty, all the great stuff. But yeah, for those of you who need the stand, let Value Electronics know. They will throw in the stand when you remind them, hey, FOMO sent me here, give me the stand. Need to replace my C10. And let us know what your viewing situation is, your room, content, gaming, all of that, and we'll see if I can help you. Oh, you sent a super chat. I see it, D. Thank you for reminding me. I am looking at the 77-inch G4 G5 A95L, so flagship buyer. It will be in a media room that allows some light during the day, but dark at night. I will be streaming movies, Blu-ray, and sports. Thoughts? I get the G5 because it allows some light during the day and sports. The G5 will not dim. End. A95L cannot get us bright watching sports. In a dark room, it's fine, right? So if you only watch sports in a dark room, not a big deal. It's when you're using it as a media room and you have light and you're across the room, that G5 is unbelievably bright. G4 is very close, but the G4 at that brightness loses color, which I don't like. The G5 gets brighter and does not lose color, so your skin tones, your grasses, everything will look more natural. On the G4, they're pushing the green really hard, they're pushing the blue a little hard, and so everything's really cool and it's slightly desaturated. So it doesn't even look like an OLED, it's just very bright. G5 preserves that OLED look. So if sports is even 30% of what you watch during the day, it's worth getting the G5. A95L to me is 100% light controlled room, then everything looks fine, right? It's when you get into the mixed bright light room where the sports, it's not going to keep up. So yeah, 77-inch G5 because of light during the day and sports. Now at night, that's going to be way too bright, so you'll be toning it all down. But I think during the day, whatever it is you watch, football, basketball, soccer, especially hockey, God forbid, hockey, the G5 is a specialist in that. So yes, that is my recommendation. And of course, the G5 is very popular right now. It's probably the most trending OLED in a while. So depending on the size you choose also, this is something to keep an eye on in terms of drops in price come Black Friday, if that's what you're thinking. If you're thinking of getting it now, definitely give Robert a call because he's getting all the first allocations so you enjoy it the entire year. Thank you for that question. And hey, click like, guys, if you're enjoying these discussions. Although we're talking affordable, good OLED TVs, wide open, whatever you guys want to talk about. Payman asks, have you and Brian seen the new Sony TV lineup for 2025? Yes. Or will the event on 2nd be a premiere for everyone? No. So on the 2nd, we'll be allowed to share what we think, what we've seen, all that good stuff, and we'll be able to we'll be allowed to share you the lineup, the prices, and sizes. To me, specs are meaningless without context, so we'll show you the context, what these specs mean. But yes, you're going to get a lot of our first impressions, and by a lot of creators who has seen Sony's lineup now. So yep, April 2nd, it's going to be fun, guys. I'll actually have a live stream on April 2nd. So same as before, 9 a.m. I'm allowed, or whenever my embargo lifts, I'm going to run it 30 minutes before then, get you guys all riled up, boom, at the right time, we're going to talk Sony and see if it's competitive this year or even better than we expected. No doubt. Okay, Antique, follow-up. Why is the G5 a disappointment based on Vincent's review? Besides no DTS support, because I'm a huge movie watcher gamer, he talked about the G5 still having bad gradation and also some raised blacks in some situations when watching different content. Okay, got it. So here's my take on that. The bad gradation, that is a WOLED issue. So this is very interesting. LG processing doesn't appear to handle color gradation well without additional information. That same content in Dolby Vision, graded for Dolby Vision, actually should remove a lot of that gradation issue. So I don't know if Vincent had the comparison where it's the same source, except one source is HDR and one source is Dolby Vision. Classy has tested this and noticed that in Dolby Vision, a lot of the gradation issues have been eliminated because there's more detail, or rather there's more data for the G5 to process, right? Now, this doesn't appear to be a problem with QD-OLED. So is it a combination of WOLED processing and the Dolby Vision? Maybe, but that's just an observation that we've had. Okay, so that's something to think about. It doesn't appear it's ever going to be solved. If we're at this late generation and this is still an issue, I think it's the limitations of WOLED, given its limited color bandwidth, color space. Now, next up is the raised blacks in some situations when watching different content. So this is a moving target, I think, for all TVs. I had issues with crushed blacks. For me, I prefer, and so this is completely subjective, you have to ask yourself, do you prefer crushed blacks or raised blacks? When we say on an OLED, right, let's have some context. When an OLED has slightly raised blacks, in a dark room, you will notice it slightly. In a bright room, it's perfect. Why? When you're in a bright room, ambient light noise makes it impossible to distinguish shadow detail. If anything, slightly raised blacks in a bright room will still look crushed, right? So this is only going to be visible in a completely dark room, and you're looking for it. In a bright room, I prefer slightly raised blacks because I end up raising the gamma anyway, so it's not a big deal. But if you are a purist watching in a dark room and you cannot calibrate that out, yeah, that could be a problem. But I rather err on the side of slightly raised than slightly crushed because my G4 slightly crushed. So when I was watching Dune 2, or no, Dune, yeah, it was Dune 1, during that invasion, nighttime invasion, the crushed blacks was very distracting. I can tell it was crushed because I had my reference monitor and I'm like, man, I'm losing detail. So when I tried to raise it, then it became too bright. Then it looked like they were raiding in early morning instead, right? Whereas the Bravia 9 nailed it and the A95L nailed it. And that is an issue where it was a little bit more crushed on the G4 than I had wanted. And adjusting stuff just didn't get there. And it's a panel variance too. Speaking of Classy, he had some TVs that was fine, some TVs that was crushed. But at the end of the day, I think LG may have overcorrected and went raised because of the complaints about crushed. And so if you're going to overcorrect, now I know you're asking, wait, why overcorrect? Why can't you get it right? You can't, because that near black stimulus is so hard to get that charge. You're either going to add too much charge or not enough. It's just, you cannot get that perfect charge. You just cannot with OLED. So it's just something to keep in mind. And lastly, how much content do you watch have this issue? So to be honest, I don't watch a 1917 all the time. I'm sure you'll see this in 1917, going up the staircase, as well as those dark scenes in Dune or some of the creepy movies, right? So if you watch a lot of that, yes. In a dark room, obviously, then yes, better to get a QD-OLED or A95L. But then raised black, maybe it works out for you, right? Because you want to see the detail. But then on the other hand, I watch realistically in a moderately lit room. This is not an issue for me. So definitely look at your use case. But that's interesting to hear that the G5, once again, LG overcorrected the other way. And you can't blame them. I mean, they're trying, right? No technology is perfect. And you're asking, oh, QD-OLED, what's the limitation of QD-OLED? It's the scatter plate. If you have a bright room, it's going to look magenta when the TV's off or on because the scatter plate's absorbing the light and it's affecting the color of the TV. And that's just what it is, right? So you have to accept QD-OLED for what it is as well. There is no perfect technology. If you don't notice any of that, that's great. More power to you for sure. And S90D or C4? S90D. Now, that's because we're talking pure image quality. I'm not talking about quality of life. If you prefer WebOS, get the C4 because maybe Tizen drives you crazy. If you are watching mostly TV shows, get the one that's cheaper. they're going to look identical. Seriously. TV shows meaning, Seinfeld and Modern Family and, Netflix, Show of the Week, right? Korean dramas, whatever. They're indistinguishable. They look exactly the same. Get the TV that's either less expensive, or if you're gaming, then choose one that has the gaming features you want. In sports, the S90D will get a little bit brighter in sports, so that's important to some people. But that's about it. I think you have to tell me, Lowell Kennan, what your content watching habits are. Then we can dive a bit deeper into which one's for you. This is the ultimate question. Buy the G5 now or wait until the G7? Wait, you skipping the G6? When will we see the last best version of OLED before QDEL? Is it FOLED? So first of all, if QDEL becomes a thing, FOLED is dead in the water, right? Who cares about OLED anymore if QDEL becomes a thing? And for QDEL to become a thing, if you saw my last video prior, I'm predicting 2029 to 2030 when you see larger size QDEL. I'm hoping next year we may see laptop, tablet prototypes like in the wild. 2027 we may see real laptops commercialized en masse. 2028 we might see smaller size TV like 55, 65, and then 2029/2030 we might see 77-inch. And this is all accelerated. This is not realistic. This is Samsung being speaking of Samsung, God rest his soul, the president of Samsung died this week. There are two presidents of Samsung Electronics. The one that died, unfortunately for you all, unfortunately in general that he died, but unfortunately for TV enthusiasts, he was the one in charge of making Samsung TVs awesome. That was his baby, right? TVs was his thing. He's now passed. What's going to happen next at Samsung? We don't know. So the other president that's taking over, he's in charge of memory and chips and unrelated to TVs. But he's got to step in while they find his replacement. Hopefully, his replacement is in the TV consumer electronics space, but specifically, they love TVs as much as the president did. And that's something to think about. If you take a step back and ask yourself, why is Samsung TVs so good? You have to have someone who's an ambassador for that space. If the leadership doesn't care about a product space, it's not going to be great. I mean, at best, it'll be above average, right? For it to be great, the leader of the company has to take an interest. And this president was known for taking a very personal interest in making the TVs awesome. And it showed, right? The dominance in the space, the performance, right? The Q90ER, the Q8FN, Q9FN. I mean, I could list all these TVs that really pushed the whole QLED versus OLED. That's all him, man. So this is Samsung as well, going to QDEL. Was he the one pushing QDEL? Is it still going to be pushed if he's gone? Is that aggressiveness going to be there? Is that investment? This is not cheap. To accelerate development of an all-new technology, you need the will, the leadership, and the ability to say, I'm going to swallow the cost, shareholders be damned. He was willing to do that. Is this new leadership? We don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. But as far as buy the G5 now, upgrade when the G10 is available. 5-year cycle, right? Get the G5, right? If you want a TV today, get it today. You're holding off for 5 or 6 years anyway. What does it matter that you're saving a few $100s if you buy it in a few months? Get the G5. Enjoy the heck out of it for the next 5 years. When the warranty wears out and then it starts to die, what will be available then? So this is what I tell all of you. If you're debating between now or next year or the year after, get the largest TV you can now. Enjoy the immersion. And when you upgrade, get even larger and better. So if you have the money now, get it now. Because this whole waiting FOMO thing, it's going to beat you up. Going to beat you up. Oh, here's great. Classy. FOMO, I don't have the G5 yet, nor I. On the G4, Dolby Vision mode had increased dithering, which masked some low luminance posterization, and posterization is that color banding people complain of. Don't know how the G5 does yet, so we'll see. And it could be maybe panel lottery to some degree, but yeah. Can't wait to get your insight. Thank you, Giddy, for the super chat. How come Haven't caught up with the Sony processing yet. Ah, let me tell you about that. So when we say processing, it sounds like, oh, you flip the switch and the processing gets better, right? So it's kind of like, you know, Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa 500 years ago. Why can't anyone else come up and paint him another Mona Lisa? It's been 500 years. Like, where's the evolution of mankind and his artistic ability, right? So the ability to paint the Mona Lisa is a complex combination of so many things in addition to talent. So when you are making a TV's processor, you have the obvious tone mapping, right? Brightness levels, contrast, right? So you have these benchmarks, but then to bring it all together in every possible content, like when I discovered the issues with the QM7K, TCL immediately contacted me and said, hey, what's the timestamp on the Game of Thrones? We got to fix it right now. So your response could be, wait, you didn't catch this during QC? And the answer is, you don't know what you don't know. You only have a certain battery of tests, and they pass that battery, and you think you have yourself a winner. Then FOMO or Classy picks it up, puts in some random movie like It, right? I know Classy loves It. Like, who in China is watching It to find these luminous issues, right? Nobody. Like, 1917, who in China is stopping at the 1 hour, 10-minute mark in 1917? Nobody. Or Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 3, at the 6.5-minute mark. Me. So you don't know what you don't know. But you know who does this more than anybody else? It's a company that literally owns the largest movie collection and produces more movies than any TV brand. Well, no other TV brand produces movies. TCL does. But they're like Chinese kung fu movies in China, right? Still catching up to Sony, Columbia, MGM. But Sony does. And Sony knows how movies are graded. They make the Venice that captures movies. They make the grading monitors. They own a grading studio that they rent out to other studios to come in to grade. They know everything about grading. And they make the TV that then reflects the grading, and they use that TV for their client monitors in their studio. And they're constantly getting feedback. Oh, in this scene, I'm not seeing this, that, and the other. Okay, with that level of institutional knowledge, when you're now tuning your color from 0 nits, perfect black, all the way up to whatever, it's like every luminance level, they pull out a movie to check it. There is a movie that covers that, right? That's why it's so hard. Having processing, the word processing is meaningless without the application of the processing, the testing, the checking. It's like LLM, right? AI. You need all this training data to get the AI better. While image processing is very similar. You need all this movie data in various scenes to improve it. Like, if I catch something, I call Sony, they're like, oh, we're on it. And so they'll address that scene now, right? Or they'll call me back and say, I'm sorry, if we do this, the compromise is this. We're not going to compromise because the limits of the technology, it's one or the other, right? And so to have that level of depth institutionalized in your TV making, you cannot just copy that, really. Now, reviewers can help TCL and Hisense because we show them, hey, it didn't work, and they will go back and try to fix it, but they wait for us to get back to them because no matter how large their team is, you lack that depth of use cases if you don't own and operate a movie studio and the hardware that runs the entire movie studio end to end. So good question, but yeah, it's not as easy as just the word processing. I would love for it to be, by the way. But then I would have a job. All right. Hey FOMO, do you think we'll see a lot of WOLED mixed together with tandem RGB OLED from all brands? So far, based on the releases I've seen, tandem RGB OLED is the flagship thing. WOLED is the affordable thing. So something to think about. For example, this year at CES, Panasonic did not announce a WOLED model. I take it back. they have primary RGB tandem. They're both WOLED. So basic WOLED, Panasonic does not have. They are continuing to sell last year's Z85, which is the basic WOLED. Then the tandem RGB WOLED. I love that LG left out the letter W, but tandem RGB WOLED is Panasonic's new thing for this year. LG, they're just reworking the processing on the B5, C5. Very similar panel to last year. And then the tandem RGB WOLED is their big thing. Samsung appears to be using tandem RGB WOLED in the 83-inch because they have to, right? There is no QD-OLED 83 inches. So to that degree, that's how they're mixing it. But the performance delta between basic WOLED and tandem RGB WOLED is so wide that no one's going to be fooled if you mix it in the same model lineup, but you may have it as a mid-tier entry-level WOLED. Hopefully, that makes sense. Best TV to update, a 77-inch A80K, Jamie, as my secondary TV. Only replacing because my 80K looks dim. And you're right, it is. It's not as bright as you might need it. So, 77-inch, the G4, similar, right? Both WOLED. And the processing I thought in the G4 was phenomenal. Going from a 77-inch 80K to a 77-inch G4 gets you the brightness you need, blows your mind, and you're fine. And the reason I say G4, not G5, is why pay the premium when the G4 gets you so much of what you need from an A80K, honestly. Because you're not missing out on the color saturation improvements because the A80K color saturation, the G4 is going to be very similar anyway. What you're getting is that brightness. And I feel that filmmaker mode on the G4 is great, and Dolby Vision on the G4 is definitely better than Dolby Vision on the A80K. Win-win. See if you can even upgrade the size to an 83-inch MLA G4, right? Yeah, go for it. G4, my recommendation. FOMO, G5 is slightly brighter than the S95F. So, are we talking metered measurements or are we talking real content? There's a difference. And we will see that difference when we do real content. You might be right. I know most of the reviews so far have used patterns, but then in real content, it may not be so. I will tell you this. The G5 is definitely going to be brighter than S95F, SDR Sports. That's just what the G5 does very well. But in filmmaker mode where you have, it's set to D65, accurate movie stuff, right? You max out on brightness, nothing fancy. How do they tone map the brighter areas? That remains to be seen, but you could be right. It doesn't surprise me that it's slightly brighter, by the way, but will the specular highlights be brighter? What we've found is that the G series and the QD-OLED flagships, they, in certain scenes where it's full screen, maybe the G series is slightly brighter, but in other scenes where it demands a bit more color luminance, not quite there. Or the G series is slightly brighter, but it's white. You're missing color. So I had to tone mapped it down a little bit more to be a little less bright, but you have more color. Would you prefer that, hater? So there are always these trade-offs. If you're measuring white, I agree. The G5 will destroy the S95F in bright white light. But is that what you want? Is it a slightly brighter colored image or a slightly brighter white image? Remember, WOLED, the W is white. It better be brighter. But color, that still needs to be compared. So good point. I think we need to take a look at that. Is it real content brightness with color or just a white box, which I have no doubt the G5 will destroy all comers. Raptor Buddy, which brand is usually more accurate out of the box, LG or Sony? I think they are so close that it'll be subjective. Okay, let me say this. Side by side, minor differences. The Sony matches, to me, the reference monitor a touch better, but the LG is so close that if I were to put filmmaker mode, professional mode on the Sony, both of them the most accurate modes, 2 different rooms. I walk into one room, I look, watch 5 minutes. I walk into the other room, watch the same scene, 5 minutes, indistinguishable. That's where we're at, right? So they may have minor differences when they're side by side next to a reference monitor that you can see, but you take that side by side, you put them in different rooms. I don't think it's worth discussing in terms of that, but you will see measurements out of the box. Oh, delta 3, delta -2. You don't see a difference unless it's more than a -3 or more than a delta 3. And if one is delta 2 and the other one's delta 3 and they're within 1, not worth talking about, honestly. But so this is where we are. We're at a point where they're so close out of the box in filmmaker mode, in professional mode. I think you're pretty good either way. But I'll throw in a third brand that last year won the out-of-the-box accuracy. That's the Panasonic. The Panasonic Z95 was more accurate than either of those. Does that change your mind, right? I mean, technically, and I love it for that, but it wouldn't make me buy the Panasonic anymore because all three are so close. And let's throw in Samsung. Samsung filmmaker mode is incredibly accurate out of the box too. So, where are we now? Oh, look, Classy agrees with me. Raptor, I'd say neither. They both have different out-of-the-box issues. I'd say lately Samsung is the more accurate out-of-the-box in filmmaker mode, but not in game mode. And that's what I'm saying. And it's year to year, guys, right? That was last year, right, Classy? This year, 2025, who knows? Who knows? Maybe Panasonic's going to screw up. And we're talking minor. And remember, Classy is a calibrator. He can tell when you're sick or not just based on your skin tone, right? Many of you might not. This is the man. Not to say that I recommend eyeballing accuracy. All right, last questions. I'm going to wrap up in 5 minutes. You got some great questions. Hey, don't forget to click like on your way out, my friends. This was a quickie. I just had to do one on affordable OLED TVs for you all, just so you have an idea that once these things are out, meaning 24 models, they're out, and I specifically wanted to shoot this video about affordable good OLED TVs because at the affordable level, the B series, specifically the S85, the improvement to this year's model will be minor, if any at all. And if this is your budget, don't get this year's model. Save a huge bundle. Get last year's model and throw in a soundbar or whatever. So it's just a reminder that now at the flagship level, I get it, right? And that's a whole other video, awesome, expensive OLED TVs. But at the entry level, I am so happy if you can get the S85 or the LG B4 or the B3, if you can find it. I put all the links in my video description below, all the different prices. Hit it, and of course, it's an affiliate link at no cost to you. Get a small commission to help keep the FOMO on. But other than that, if you have any questions that we didn't address, just throw it in the comments section, and hopefully I see it. If not, I do regular live streams. Come by, ask then, and we'll make sure to take care of you. Okay, here's a good question. Interesting. Raptor asks, when you buy TVs that are more than a year old, or are they less accurate out of the box? Sorry if it looks like I'm focusing too much on accuracy. Just wanted to know if I need to calibrate. So you have three very good questions, and I think this is one that's worth addressing. Every year, we've noticed TVs get more and more accurate out of the box. However, at some point, it's so accurate, there's nothing more they can do. I think we're there. I think Sony is purposefully creating a color science that they think is most appealing. It may not be absolutely accurate in terms of here's a reference monitor, here's a Sony, it's an exact match. But it's close enough that they feel this is more appealing. And that's a Sony science thing. LG, every year they fiddle with it to make sure it's both accurate and appealing. And then Samsung has been yelled at for so long to be accurate, and now they are accurate, right? But what, 2019, terribly inaccurate. 2020, inaccurate. 2021, they got better. 2022, they got better. And then now they're like, the best? Like, what happened? And then Panasonic has always been focused on accuracy. But they've come to the point where they are so close, I think you're good as far as out of the box. Now, you could always get more accurate. Do you need to calibrate? And so Classy could probably chime in here because he is the calibrator. If you're not in a light-controlled room, it's a mess for you because now you have to adjust to the color of your room. The room's lighting, is it natural sunlight? Is it weird orange lights, pink LED lights? All of that affect your eye's perception of the color of the TV. So the TV may be super accurate, but if I have these bright orange tungsten lights right next to the TV, it's gonna look cool. So do you calibrate to the tungsten lights and then you change lights, now it's too warm? So be wary that when you calibrate to a dark room, it's exactly, standard to what Hollywood is looking at, right? There's a certain brightness level in your room, no ambient lighting. You went out of your way to make sure your room is light controlled. Okay, that's when calibration has the most benefits. But if you got crazy lighting in your room, you got pink, magenta, LEDs, your kids over there, your kitchen's shining in bright orange, you got daylight over here, your calibrator is going to lose their mind calibrating to your ambient lighting. And then your wife changes all the lights and suddenly it's all cool fluorescent lights. Now what? So if you do calibrate, make sure you have light controlled viewing environment, because it is impossible to match your ambient lighting and then recalibrate every time. Now, some TVs like the Sony, in a bright room, that's what they're designed for. They will adjust the lighting of the TV, the color, temperature of the TV to your room's lighting because they have a light sensor. Others will just adjust the brightness, right? But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that accuracy is important to you. You have to control the lighting of your room. No lighting at all, basically, right? With the special gray luminance behind the screen that color graders use. That's the ideal situation. And Classy will tell you exactly what kind of lighting you need. But in a bright mixed media room, I don't think you should be calibrating, because you got to turn your TV up, you got to fight the brightness. You're watching mixed content, Seinfeld, Friends, and football. You're good. So yeah, Raptor, you tell me what your room condition is, and we'll see. I hate the pink and green tint on WOLEDs. What, Garrett? You're not 15? Come on now. Yeah, I do too. All right, one last super chat before I run off. Thank you, Mena Cordero, number 1. I have an 85-inch QD-OLED. That's a good TV. As a matter of fact, one of my favorites. I'd like something better on the same size or bigger. Ooh, for the 4,000 to 5,000. Darkroom, sports, 4K UHD, over-the-air football, and streaming. Man, you're so fortunate. At that price, you will be very happy with a Bravia 9. 85-inch, also mini-LED. Same size. Now, bigger, you don't have many choices. You have the QM 9K at 98-inch, but it's going to be more than $5,000. I think you'll be very happy at the 85-inch with a Bravia 9. Among all the mini-LEDs, that's great. Alternatively, you have the 83-inch G4, that's around 5,000, but you're used to mini-LED. So I think the Bravia 9 upgrade will be noticeable to you. I like the color. I like everything about the Bravia 9 relative to Samsung in the mini-LED space. So definitely consider the Bravia 9 or the G4 at the 83-inch. But you're in a dark room, so the G4 actually may look pretty amazing in a dark room, now that I think about it. So it'll be between those two, depending on your budget. Now, the Bravia 9 85-inch is currently $3,700, $4,000, around there. So the low end, and you could take that money and blow it on something else. And the 83-inch G4, I think, is closer to 5, maybe just above 5 still. So I don't think it's worth getting that far above 5,000, mostly because 4K UHD Blu-ray, I mean, yeah, going to 83-inch G4 is a game changer. I think you would enjoy that greatly. And it's great for football and streaming. So get the best. You're saving $1,000. I think you're at $1,000 difference between the two. So either one is a great choice, I believe. There's no wrong answer there. But if it was me and I do a little gaming, I'd go with the G4, 83-inch, because that gaming is untouched by any Sony TV. Hi, Lisa. I apologize if I didn't say hello earlier. And Garrett, you're right. It is my favorite Samsung mini LED still. I think that was their peak mini-LED, or a QN95A. I had the QN95A and the QN90A. That's their peak mini-LED, and then from there they just kind of held steady. I don't think they improved much. They kind of, what do they call it? Moved the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? They changed this and they lost that. So I really like the QN90A. I think that was their peak performance as well. My kind of question, RZA. I'm torn between a 75, try this again. RZA asks, I'm torn between a 77-inch B5 or a 65-inch C5 or S90F for this year. Okay, such different TVs. 77-inch B5 over the 65-inch C5 for normal content because, for any content, the size will trump all. C5 and B5 are so close, the 77-inch is going to trump it in immersion. Yes, the C5 will be slightly brighter here and there, but the 77-inch is 77 inches. That's a huge jump from 65 to 77. I go with the 77 B5 over the C5. Now, the S90F is a completely different beast. It's QD-OLED. It is going to be a little bit brighter than the C5, but even then, if you're watching normal content, I go with the 77-inch B5. For gaming, now, okay, I don't have the S90F to compare it to. I will, so we can talk about that. So let's not talk about gaming. Let's not talk about high-end HDR performance. We talk about everyday watching. Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, over the air. Go with the 77-inch B5, enjoy the immersion, call it a day. The extra size makes up the difference for a slight loss in brightness to either TV. So that's it. 77-inch B5 for most content. Hey Reep, so this is a good question. I've heard you and other reviewers say that the largest size of a model line are brighter than the smaller sizes. Like the S95D at 77 inch is brighter than 65. What is the reason for this? Will the S95F be the same? So, as far as OLED is concerned, or QD-OLED in this case, I don't see that. I do see it in mini-LED. So I could say with confidence, mini-LED TVs, when they say up to a certain brightness, that up to is always the larger sizes, right? So you'll see it this year with the QM7K, up to 3000 nits. Well, we saw my 65-inch was bright, but it could get brighter at 75 inches. That's where it hits that 3000 nit spec. Or the QM8K, or the QM891G last year from TCL, 115-inch, 5000 nits. None of the TVs that are smaller size, QM8 comes even close to that, right? So with mini LED, that is definite. Now, OLED, we could ask Classy if you noticed that the larger OLEDs get a little bit brighter. I haven't heard that personally. I think they're very close because OLED, the way if anything, the larger sizes are dimmer. So in the past, larger OLEDs don't get as bright as the smaller OLEDs for heat reasons, right? The larger the panel, the more heat when they get to the same brightness. So if anything on an OLED, I wouldn't be surprised if it was less bright. As a matter of fact, the G series, their power unit wasn't powerful enough to sustain the brightness of a 65-inch compared to an 83-inch. So the 83-inch could not sustain that brightness compared to the 65. So definitely on the OLED, it's probably not the case. On the mini LED, that is the case. And if there are differences, they are panel variances that you will see in the same size. I've seen the C series at a 65-inch, 200 nit differences in the same model lineup because panel variance. Now, if you win, hey, you get that 200 nits higher than the quoted average. And if you lose, it's 200 nits lower than the quoted average, but it's a panel variance issue. So if they notice it and it's within 200 nits, I call it a panel variance. Now, if it's significant, so let's say the peak is, I'm going to make this up, 1500 nits. And then the larger size is 1600 nits. That 100 nits, not important. I'll say 1650 versus 1700, right? 1400 versus 1650, not important at all. Two minor, because it's logarithmic, nits and brightness. So the difference between 1600 and 1700 nits is not noticeable. The difference between 100 nits and 200 nits is twice the brightness. So nit as an absolute value is not helpful unless you know what the difference you're talking about. So at these brightnesses that they're quoting, if it's only a few hundred nit difference, I don't think it's a big deal, Reeb. But a mini LED, we're talking 1,000 nit difference practically, like 500, or we're going from 2,500 to 3,000, that big jumps. That is an intended difference. And there we go. Classy has measured last year. G4, 55-inch, 83-inch, all measure identical brightness. Bigger display just looks brighter from the larger area. And that's why I tell you guys, the B4 or the B3, the B series at an 83-inch, it looks bright, even though it may not be if you measure it pixel to pixel. So I take the quote-unquote drop in brightness, increase the size. It's like a movie theater, right? A movie theater doesn't break 100 nits, and it's super bright, right? So yeah. Thanks, Kasi. I knew you'd come through. Okay, one more super chat and we'll call it a day. Metacordero follows up. 85-inch Q98 versus 2025. 98-inch, 100-inch high sensor TCL. No gaming. I take the size, run away with it. Perfect. So the high sense that you should be looking at would be probably the U8. And the TCL you should be looking at would be the QM8K. We're talking the same level as the QN98 in terms of their processing, where they are in their lineup. So the U8 and the QM8 would be a match for the QN98 in terms of that level of processing. And the Hisense, I don't think the U9 even comes in 100-inch. I think it taps out at 85. So you got the U8 at 100-inch and the QM8K at 98-inch. Those are two to consider. So we'll see how well they do. In a few weeks, I'll get them both. I'll get both TVs, so we'll have a lot of fun. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you so much. Hey, don't forget, click like on your way out so we can get this video out there. Until next time, my friends, stop the film. Until next time, I said stop filming. Stop the FOMO.